The road was quiet, far too quiet for a place that had seen so much movement only hours earlier. A thin layer of dust still hung in the cold morning air, drifting slowly over broken branches and churned earth. Somewhere in the distance, an engine rumbled low and heavy, like a storm moving closer. You could almost feel the tension pressing down on the ground itself. Then, from behind a line of trees, the unmistakable silhouette of German Panthers began to emerge. Long barrels, sloped armor, confident, seemingly unstoppable. They moved like predators that had never truly been challenged. And why would they be? Most Allied tanks did not stand much of a chance against them. But hidden in the shadows, waiting in silence, something unexpected was about to change everything. It was early September, 1944, near the dense forests and rolling farmland of eastern France, not far from the Moselle River. The war in Europe had entered a new phase. After the breakout from Normandy in August, Allied forces were pushing fast across France, trying to keep their momentum before German defenses could regroup. Speed was everything. The U.S. Army needed units that could move quickly, strike hard, and disappear before the enemy could react. That was where the M18 Hellcat came in. The M18 Hellcat was not what most soldiers imagined when they thought of a tank. It had thin armor, barely enough to stop small arms fire. Its turret was open at the top, leaving the crew exposed to the weather and to enemy fire. But what it lacked in protection, it made up for in speed. The Hellcat was the fastest armored fighting vehicle of the war, capable of reaching nearly 55 miles per hour on roads. That speed was not just a feature, it was the entire philosophy behind the machine. The Hellcat was never built to stand still and trade blows. It was built to hunt. The idea behind American tank destroyers had been shaped long before this moment. U.S. Army doctrine, developed in the early years of the war, assumed that German armored forces would attack in large, concentrated formations. To counter that threat, the Americans created specialized units designed not to fight alongside infantry like traditional tanks, but to respond quickly to breakthroughs and destroy enemy armor. These units needed mobility above all else, and really, the Hellcat was the purest expression of that idea. Beneath its light frame, the Hellcat carried a 76mm gun, powerful enough to penetrate German armor when used correctly. But correctly was the key word. The gun alone was not enough. The crews had to think differently. They had to move, flank, disappear, and strike again. They had to fight smarter, not harder. Every crewman understood that survival depended on speed and positioning, not armor. In the German ranks, the Panther tank had already earned a formidable reputation. Introduced in 1943, it combined strong armor, a powerful 75mm gun, and excellent mobility. German tank crews trusted it. They knew that in a direct fight, the Panther could outgun and outlast most Allied vehicles. When they heard reports about American tank destroyers, many dismissed them outright. Thin armor, open tops. These were not machines to fear. At least, that was what they believed. But by late 1944, cracks were beginning to show. German units were no longer operating with the same strength they had once enjoyed. Fuel shortages were becoming a constant problem. Replacement crews often lacked the experience of earlier veterans. Communication was not always reliable. Still, on the surface, a column of Panthers moving down a road looked just as dangerous as ever. On the morning of September 19th, 1944, elements of a German armored column were moving cautiously along a narrow road lined with trees and hedges. They had learned the hard way that American forces could appear almost anywhere. Even so, the mood among the Panther crews remained confident. They had survived weeks of fighting, pushing back against Allied advances, and they believed they still held the upper hand when it came to armored warfare. What they did not know was that a small unit of U.S. tank destroyers had already taken position nearby. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, attached to the U.S. Third Army under General George S. Patton, had been operating aggressively in the region. Among them was a platoon of M18 Hellcats, commanded by young but experienced officers who understood exactly what their machines could do, and just as importantly, what they could not do. These men were not new to combat. Many had already seen action during the rapid advance across France after the Normandy breakout. They had faced German anti-tank guns, ambushes, and sudden counterattacks. They had learned quickly and often the hard way. Every encounter had shaped how they fought. By the time they reached the Moselle region, they were no longer simply following doctrine. They were adapting it. The men of the Hellcat crews understood one brutal truth. Standing still meant death. They knew that facing a Panther head-on was a mistake. But they also knew something else. And this is where the story begins to turn. The Panther had weaknesses. Its side armor was thinner. Its rear was vulnerable. And in the chaos of movement, even the most powerful tank could be caught off guard. The American platoon commander, a lieutenant whose name would later appear in after-action reports but never become widely known, had chosen his position with extreme care. His Hellcats were hidden along a slight rise overlooking the road. The terrain was uneven, covered with trees and patches of brush that broke up their outlines. From a distance, they were almost invisible. He had studied the ground before sunrise, walking parts of it himself, noting where the road narrowed, where the trees were thickest, where the vehicles could move unseen. He understood that this fight would be decided before the first shot was ever fired. Positioning was everything. The plan was simple but dangerous. Let the German column move into the kill zone, wait until the lead tanks passed, then strike the middle and rear, cutting off any chance of retreat or maneuver. It required timing, discipline, nerves strong enough to hold fire even as enemy tanks rolled closer and closer. Inside the Hellcats, the crews waited. The engines idled quietly. The gunners kept their sights fixed on the road. The loaders held shells ready, hands steady. Despite the tension, there was still that strange battlefield calm, the soft clink of metal, the faint hum of the engine, the distant crunch of tracks on dirt, growing louder with every passing second. Time seemed to stretch, seconds felt longer. Every man inside those vehicles knew that once the shooting started, everything would move fast. There would be no time to think, only time to act. Then the first Panther appeared in full view. It moved slowly, its turret scanning from side to side. Behind it came another, and then another. 9 in total, spaced along the road, their dark shapes cutting through the morning light. They looked unstoppable, like a steel river flowing forward. But the lieutenant gave no order yet. The Panthers continued on, unaware. They passed the first hidden Hellcat, then the second. The American crews held their breath. One wrong move, one premature shot, and the entire plan would collapse. When the fourth Panther reached the center of the kill zone, the lieutenant finally gave the signal. The silence shattered. The first Hellcat fired, its 76mm gun cracking through the air. The shell slammed into the side of a Panther, punching through its armor. A split second later, a second shot followed from another Hellcat, striking the rear of a different tank. Flames burst from the engine compartment. Black smoke rose instantly. For a brief moment, the German column froze, caught between confusion and shock. They had expected resistance, yes, but not this. Not from hidden positions, not with this kind of precision. Then the Hellcats moved. And really, this was the part that made them deadly. They did not stay in place to exchange fire. As soon as they fired, they shifted positions, using their speed to relocate before the Panthers could respond. One Hellcat rolled forward to a new firing angle, while another reversed behind cover, only to reappear moments later from a different direction. The Panthers tried to react. Their turrets swung toward the flashes of gunfire. One fired blindly into the trees, its shell tearing through branches but hitting nothing. Another attempted to turn its hull, trying to bring its frontal armor toward the threat, but the road was narrow and the column was packed tightly. Movement was limited. A third Hellcat fired, striking another Panther in the side. The impact sent sparks and debris flying. The tank lurched, then stopped, smoke pouring from its hull. Inside the German tanks, orders were shouted, engines revved, and commanders tried to regain control. But the situation was already slipping away from them. They could not see a clear enemy. The shots were coming from different directions, fast and accurate. It felt as if they were surrounded by something this Mitt could not pin down. The American crews kept up the pressure. They worked as a coordinated unit, each Hellcat supporting the others. One would fire and draw attention, while another moved into position for a better shot. Their speed allowed them to dictate the fight, turning the Panthers' greatest strengths into a weakness. Within minutes, 3 Panthers were burning. The road was now blocked. The lead tanks could not move forward. The rear tanks could not retreat. The column had become a trap. The lieutenant adjusted his plan on the fly. He ordered one Hellcat to swing wide along the flank, using a small dirt path that ran parallel to the road. The driver pushed the engine hard, the vehicle bouncing over rough ground, branches scraping against the hull. It was risky, but it would give them a new angle. As the Hellcat emerged on the side of the German column, its gunner lined up a shot at another Panther's rear. He fired. The shell hit squarely, igniting the tank almost instantly. Now the German crews were no longer confident. The idea that these lightly armored American vehicles were destroying Panthers one after another was something they had never truly believed possible. The laughter, the dismissive attitude, all of it vanished. What replaced it was urgency. One Panther finally managed to bring its gun to bear on a Hellcat that had lingered a moment too long. It fired. The shell struck the ground just short, sending dirt and debris into the air. The Hellcat reversed immediately, disappearing behind cover before a second shot could be taken. The American crews knew they could not afford mistakes. One direct hit from a Panther would have been enough to destroy them. Their survival depended on constant movement, constant awareness. Another shot rang out from a Hellcat positioned slightly uphill. The shell struck a Panther's turret ring, jamming it. The tank could no longer rotate its gun effectively. Moments later, a follow-up shot finished it. 5 Panthers were now out of action. The remaining German tanks tried to break free. One attempted to push forward, forcing its way past the wreckage, but in doing so, it exposed its side. A Hellcat seized the chance, fired, and hit just behind the turret. The tank shuddered and came to a stop. 6. The fight was turning into something the German crews had never imagined. A controlled ambush, executed with precision, driven by speed. The sounds of battle filled the air, the crack of gunfire, the roar of engines, the metallic clang of impacts. Smoke hung thick over the road, mixing with the smell of burning fuel. You could almost taste it, almost feel it filling your lungs. And yet, in the middle of all that chaos, the lieutenant remained calm. He kept scanning through binoculars, adjusting positions with hand signals and radio calls. His voice stayed steady even as the battle intensified. Leadership in moments like this was not about shouting. It was about clarity. It was about control. Another Hellcat shifted position again, using a shallow ditch for cover. Its gunner waited for a clear shot. When one of the Panthers tried to reverse, exposing its rear, he fired. The shell hit, and the tank erupted in flames. 7. The German column was now in full chaos. Communication between tanks had broken down. Visibility was poor because of smoke and debris. Each crew was fighting its own battle, struggling simply to survive. Some German crewmen began abandoning damaged tanks, scrambling out and seeking cover along the roadside. Others remained inside, hoping to repair the damage or fight back. But the once organized column had become a scattering of isolated machines, each one trapped in its own crisis. The 8th Panther was hit shortly after, this time by a Hellcat that had circled farther around than the Germans expected. The shot came from an angle they had not even considered. Its side armor offered little resistance. 8. Only one Panther remained operational. It tried to retreat, reversing down the road, but the wreckage blocked its path. Its driver attempted to maneuver around, but the space was too tight. The tank turned slightly, searching for some kind of escape. The final Hellcat took position. The gunner steadied his aim. The distance was short. The target was clear. He fired. The shell struck the Panther's rear and penetrated deeply. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a burst of flame shot out, followed by thick smoke. The tank stopped moving. 9. The ambush was over. The entire engagement had lasted only a few minutes. But its impact was much greater than the time it took. 9 Panther tanks, machines that had dominated battlefields and inspired confidence in the men who crewed them, had been taken out by a small group of fast, lightly armored tank destroyers. The American crews did not celebrate right away. They stayed alert, scanning for additional threats. Only when they were sure the area was secure did they allow themselves to relax, even slightly. Some of them climbed partway out of the open turrets and looked across the battlefield. What they saw was something few men on either side would ever forget. Burning Panthers scattered along the road, smoke rising into the sky, the result of careful planning, discipline, and execution. They had done what many would have considered impossible. Later reports would describe the action in more formal language, noting the effectiveness of the ambush, the coordination of the units, and the destruction of enemy armor. But reports like that could never fully capture what it felt like in those moments. The tension, the speed, the constant movement, the awareness that one mistake could mean death. That was the truth inside the action. And really, that truth mattered more than any clean summary written after the smoke had cleared. The encounter became one of many examples showing how the M18 Hellcat was meant to be used. It was not a tank in the traditional sense. It was a hunter, relying on speed, positioning, and surprise. That was its real armor. That was its real advantage. And when handled by crews who understood that, it could become something far more dangerous than its thin plates and open turrets suggested. Across the Western Front, similar lessons were being learned. Heavy armor alone was not enough. Flexibility, communication, and quick decision-making were becoming just as important. The Hellcat crews represented a shift in battlefield thinking, a move toward a more dynamic kind of warfare. But the deeper point was even more striking than that. The battlefield was beginning to reward those who adapted fastest, not simply those who arrived with the thickest steel. For the German crews who survived, the lesson was unmistakable. The enemy they had underestimated was capable of adapting, using different tactics, and turning perceived weaknesses into strengths. What had looked fragile from a distance had become lethal up close. What had seemed easy to dismiss had suddenly become impossible to ignore. You can almost imagine the silence that followed the fight. The smoke slowly clearing, the wrecks of the Panthers still burning. The strange quiet that returns after violence has spent itself. The Hellcats moved on soon after. They still had more ground to cover, more battles ahead, more danger waiting somewhere beyond the next tree line. The war was not over, but for that one moment on that narrow road in eastern France, they had rewritten the rules of the fight, and somewhere in the memory of the men who witnessed it, the image remained. A group of fast, lightly armored machines striking with precision, vanishing before the enemy could fully understand what had happened. The laughter that may once have greeted them was gone. What replaced it was something else entirely. Respect. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to leave a comment, give it a like, and subscribe for more.